Greetings. We want to talk for just a few minutes about strings and formatting. What are our objectives? Well, we want to be aware of some of the API classes, the things we get with the Java API, when we want to manipulate strings of characters, also known as strings. We also want to be able to format strings, dates, and numbers. When I say format strings, we want to be able to format dates and numbers according to however we choose to have them formatted. Numbers, for example, should we have commas, should we have decimal points, etc. And finally, we want to be able to parse strings into tokens. It means to break up strings into pieces according to some delimiter. Let's start off and have a brief understanding of what type of classes in Java represent characters or sequences of characters. First is the character class, uppercase C. We also have the char primitive type. We have the string class, which is what we'll probably be using most of currently. Then we also have string builder and string buffer classes, which represent changeable or mutable classes. We'll take a look at that. I'm going to encourage you to take a look at the Java API to see all of the various classes and things you can do with these classes. Let's start off with the character class. Character is a wrapper class that is used when we want a character primitive, char primitive, but we want it to be in a object form. It also has some utility methods that we can use to interrogate classes. Bear in mind that characters in Java are Unicode multi-language characters. That Java uses 2 bytes to represent a character as opposed to the ASCII sequence. It turns out Unicode, by doing that, we can represent most any language we want to as far as the data is concerned. Character is a wrapper class, note the uppercase C, to convert from and to a char primitive. We also have some static methods. Is this character a digit? We pass the character is digit a char primitive, and it will return if it's a digit or not. We can also test for is letter, is lower. We can also take a character, convert it to uppercase or to lowercase. We can convert to and from uppercase C characters with a value of or a character value method. String is what we're going to concentrate on. String classes, think of if a class is a template for objects, and the string class is a template when we create strings. We can create a string, the left side of this next assignment statement, string str, that declares a string variable called str. The right hand side is a special type of constructor only available with strings. We can just put a string of characters inside double quotes, and that automatically creates it. It's as if we said new string hello world. Strings are a very special class in Java, and they've been there from the beginning, and they decided they didn't want to have to say string str equals new string hello world. We can think of it as an array of characters, but really it's an object because it has many methods. It's not a null terminated null terminated array of characters as it is in some languages. When we think of characters in a string, we will think of their position. When we think of their position, we have to remember that strings will be counted indexed starting at 0. So the first character is always index number 0, and then so a 10-character string would go from 0 to 9. We should remember that string objects are immutable. Once you make a string, you actually can't change it. That's going to be counterintuitive, but that's the way strings are. We'll see later string builder and string buffer are actually mutable or changeable strings. And we're going to have string objects have object level methods. In other words, str dot something, methods that manipulate pieces of the string. But again, it's not going to change the base string. There's also some static methods that operate at the class level, not the object level, like string.format, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes. What are some of just a few of the string methods? We can get the length with a object name.length. We can figure out which character is at which position with the character at method. We can find out, does a particular string exist in our string with the index of, and it would return the location of the substring, or it could return a -1 if it's not found. So oftentimes we want to do string manipulations, and that's very handy. Remember, in comparing things, for objects, it's usually not a good idea to use equal equal. You can use equal equal when you're comparing integers or things like that, but equal equals for objects often gives you the wrong results. So what you want to use for strings, if you want to find out if two strings are equal, like str and str2, we would say str dot equals and then list the second string, or str dot equals and then in quotes hello world. If we wanted one to be true there, we could say if str dot equals and then left paren double quote my string end quote, that should return true. So that returns a true or false, a boolean, depending on whether or not they're equals. It has its ignore case counterpart, where if you want to do a case insensitive search, oftentimes you want to find a piece of a string or a substring. The string object name dot substring can do that for you. It takes either one or two parameters. In the first, more general case, it can take the beginning position, and then the second one is sort of unusual. It takes one, the number refers to one past the end. So if you wanted to, for example, find 0, 1, 2, 3, if you want to do 3, 6 in my string, that would return the string, the 1, 2, 3, it would start off with a space, and then 4, 5, 6, which would be the R, and so it would be space ST would be 3, 6. The past the end, you have to pay attention, so take a look at that at the API. And we also have a substring that takes just one index, so we can start at some beginning integer and then go until we hit the end of the string. Here's some more. We can convert strings to uppercase, to lowercase. We can replace strings. We can replace the first occurrence of a string in another string, etc. There is a method contains to return a true or false if one string contains another. You can also use index of for that a similar type purpose, but it returns a number instead of a boolean. You can concatenate two strings. Remember, we know how to concatenate two strings with the plus sign. The plus sign typically doesn't work for any type of objects, but string is a special string. And then finally, we want to mention compare to. Sometimes it's not good enough just to know whether or not two strings are equal, but you might want to find out which one's larger, which one's smaller. So when you compare two strings, str compared to string 2, for example, we can return a negative, a 0, or a positive number depending on whether or not it's less than, equal, equals, or greater than another string. In any event, there's lots more in the API, so take a look at them. The next significant topic we want to talk about is breaking strings up, parsing strings. There's several ways to do that in Java. We're going to talk about one of them. It's a Java 5.0 edition, and that's string.split. If we take a string, we can call the split method to break it up into an array of, I'm going to say, tokens, each token being a piece of the string. In the example, my dog has fleas, if we said str.split, it would break it up into an array with 4 strings. My dog has fleas. In this case, we're using white space as a delimiter. Sometimes we have special delimiters we want to use, so you can specify what delimiter do you want, tab delimiter, colon delimiter, etc. And Java can handle that quite well. Very common when you're working with data to have delimited type data. You can also take a look at string tokenizer in the API. I'll briefly mention string buffer and string builder. The purpose of string builder and string buffer is sometimes if you want to manipulate strings in place, you can't really do that with the string class because it tends to be inefficient for manipulating strings in place because strings are immutable. So every time you make a change to a string, you're really creating a new string. If you're doing heavy, intensive string updating, then string builder and string buffer will be what you want to use. String buffer has been around for a while, and string builder is a newer Java 5.0. It's a faster version of string buffer. It's not useful for multi-threaded applications where you might have 2 different threads updating the same object at a time. And again, it's going to have many of the same methods that string does, but it has some special methods like inserting into a string, deleting a string, appending to a string, etc. And the final topic I want to mention briefly is formatting strings. Formatting let's talk about 2. Dates and numbers are common things that you want to do, and Java has provided a string.format class that it can use. It's very similar for folks that are used to the printf command in C. You can check out printf in the Java API. The gist of it is very similar to string.format. String.format will take 2 or more parameters, a format string, and then the thing that needs to be formatted. And that thing can be multiple things if we need to. So let's just start off with if we want to format one thing, for example, a number. The string format, the format string, looks like a very normal string, except inserted into it will be a special cryptic format specifier that begins with a %. If you see a % in a format string, it means interpret what follows as how to format the args thing that is to be formatted. For example, here, let's assume that we have some float called bill. We've calculated your bill at a store or whatever. As this number 12342.986747, etc. Or this could have been calculated. In any event, it's a variable that contains a float. So when you want to print it out, you can say string.format. Notice that the parameters to format are 2. The first is the format string. The second is the thing to format. Within that format string, you can notice that there's a % that says, oh, interpret the following characters as special things that will tell me how to format the, in this case, the bill. So %,.2f, the f says it's going to be a floating point format. The period says we want a decimal point. Comma says we want commas in our thousands position. And the .2 says I want 2 positions after the decimal point. So that's going to display your tab is $12,000, comma 342.99, etc. This will take a little bit of getting used to, but just remember that the % is the format specifier, there are hundreds of different ways that you can format dates and numbers using this percent. You can look up all the different ways in the formatter class in the API. We'll look at just a couple of examples, but pretty much anything you want to format is probably in the API. We have some numbers that have been initialized. We have a date variable called today1, which is actually set to the current date without just by saying new date. The first one says, oh, we want to have whole numbers. %D is just, I want whole decimal numbers, no decimal point. Your bill is $42. The next is %.2f, that says I want 2 places to the right of the decimal point. Notice that this will round, it does not truncate. So this is actually a good thing when you want to format a number and perhaps it's 42.99000001. We remember that floats in Java, floats and doubles are not precise when they get converted into decimal output. Here's a few more examples. %,D, you can add commas. The next one has 2 different things. So if we want to format 2 things, and the things could be numbers, dates, whatever, we're going to have 2 format specifiers in here. So your rank is 42 out of 902, and here's you're going to have to look up in the API one of the many ways you can format a date. We're going to format that with MMDDYY. You can have dates and times. There's all sorts of different ways to format dates. I encourage you to look up the different ways in the Java API. There's also some more formats in the attached document. And the last one, %TD. The %T says it's a date, and then the character that follows it says what's the format. Here you can get the day of the week if you choose to. Okay, this was a pretty quick look through at strings, but I wanted to give you some central place to start off on your journey with strings. We wanted to talk about formatting strings in particular. We want to look at some of the ways you can break strings up, put them back together again, interrogate strings, and also we wanted to be able to parse strings into tokens.